In 1987, FBI agent Nathan Raines left his Dallas office for a meeting with an informant and was never seen again. The FBI launched one of its largest internal searches, but found nothing. Then, 4 years later, a homeless man seeking shelter in an abandoned storage unit stumbled upon a shocking sight. What investigators discovered inside would expose horrors beyond comprehension and shake the entire bureau. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the Dallas FBI field office as Special Agent Mark Callahan hunched over his desk, squinting at a case file through the steam rising from his coffee mug. It was March 15, 1991, another gray morning in Texas, and Mark was reviewing cold leads on a string of unsolved kidnappings when his desk phone rang. "Callahan," he answered, still scanning the paperwork. "Agent Callahan? This is Officer Rodriguez with the Denton Police Department. We've got a situation here that might interest you." The voice on the other end sounded urgent. "We arrested a homeless man this morning for trespassing into an abandoned storage unit on the edge of town. Normally wouldn't bother the FBI, but he claims he found a blood-stained chair, shackles, and an FBI badge inside." Mark's hand froze mid-reach for his coffee. "An FBI badge?" "Yes, sir. The ID badge belongs to Special Agent Nathan Raines. The computer says he vanished in 1987. Figured you'd want to know, considering he was your partner." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Nathan. 4 years of nothing, and now this. Mark gripped the phone tighter. "Where exactly is this storage unit?" "Backwoods Storage Depot, off a secluded service road near the edge of Denton. It's behind that old defunct scrapyard on Route 77. Private facility, not one of those corporate chains. I'll send you the coordinates." "I'm on my way." Mark was already reaching for his jacket. "Don't let anyone else into that unit until I get there." Within minutes, Mark was in his bureau-issued Ford Crown Victoria, speeding north on I-35E toward Denton. The coordinates came through on his pager, and he recognized the area, a forgotten corner of town where the suburbs gave way to scrubland and abandoned industrial sites. His mind raced with possibilities. Nathan had been investigating a human trafficking ring when he disappeared. They'd been partners for 3 years, and Nathan was careful, methodical. He wouldn't have just vanished without a trace unless something had gone very wrong. The drive took 40 minutes, and as Mark pulled up to the Backwoods Storage Depot, he saw the place was already swarming with Denton PD patrol cars. The facility looked like it had seen better days. Rows of corrugated metal units behind a chain-link fence topped with rusty barbed wire. A uniformed officer waved him through the gate and directed him to Unit 47, where a cluster of officers had gathered. Mark parked and approached, his FBI credentials already in hand. "Agent Callahan?" A tall Hispanic officer extended his hand. "I'm Lieutenant Martinez, the one who called you. Thanks for coming so quickly." "Show me what you've got," Mark said, following Martinez past the yellow tape. The storage unit's roll-up door was open, revealing a space about 10 feet by 20 feet. But it was what was inside that made Mark's blood run cold. The walls were completely covered in aluminum foil, creating a bizarre reflective chamber. In the center sat a metal chair with leather restraints attached to the arms and legs. Dark stains marked the concrete floor beneath it. "Jesus," Mark breathed, stepping carefully inside. A metal table against one wall held various tools, a hammer, pliers, what looked like surgical instruments. And there, placed almost ceremoniously on the table, were Nathan's FBI badge and baseball cap. "The foil looked clean at first," Martinez said from behind him, "but look closer." Mark examined the walls more carefully. Beneath the reflective surface, he could make out discolored patches where blood had been cleaned, but not completely erased. Someone had used this place for extended periods of torture. "Tell me about the homeless man who found this," Mark said, photographing the scene with his camera. "Jerome Miles. Came into the station around 7 this morning, scared out of his mind. Said he broke in hoping to find stuff to sell, but when he saw all this..." Martinez shook his head. At first, the desk sergeant thought he was just another crazy, but when he mentioned the FBI badge and cap, we had to check it out. Where's Jerome now? Back at the station. We're holding him, but honestly, he seems more like a witness than a suspect. Mark nodded, continuing to document the scene. The setup was sophisticated. The foil would prevent any electromagnetic signals from escaping. The chair was bolted to the floor, and the tools were arranged with disturbing precision. "Who owns this unit?" Mark asked. "Working on that now. The facility manager is pulling the records." As if on cue, another patrol car pulled up outside. Two officers flanked a well-dressed man in his 50s who walked with the confident stride of someone used to being in charge. "That's him," one of the officers called out. "Property owner?" The man approached with an extended hand and a practiced smile. "Clint Haraway, I understand there's been some trouble at one of my rental units?" Martinez's demeanor shifted slightly. "Mr. Haraway, I didn't realize you owned this facility." "One of many properties," Clint said smoothly. "I'm a real estate developer. This particular depot has been in my portfolio for about 8 years. He peered into the storage unit, and his face paled. "My God, what is all this?" Mark studied the man carefully. Clint Haraway looked genuinely shocked, but Mark had learned long ago that appearances meant nothing. "We found evidence of serious crimes here, Mr. Haraway," Mark said. "I'm going to need information about who rented this unit." Of course. Clint pulled out a leather portfolio from his jacket. "I always carry basic rental information with me. Let's see. Unit 47. He flipped through several pages. "Here it is, leased to a Jonah Page, paid 5 years in advance, including an inflation adjustment." "When was this?" "The lease started in 1988. He paid cash, which isn't unusual for these types of rentals." "Can you describe Mr. Page?" Clint furrowed his brow. "It's been a few years, but white male, maybe 45, 50, average height, brown hair going gray, kept to himself. I remember thinking he seemed nervous, but people renting storage units often are. They're usually going through divorces or bankruptcies." Mark made notes. "I'll need a complete list of everyone who's rented units here, especially this one." "The detailed records are at my home office," Clint said. "I'd be happy to retrieve them for you. I keep thorough documentation of all my off-market property rentals." Lieutenant Martinez stepped forward. "Mr. Haraway is well known in Denton. He's a respected donor, supports the Police Benevolent Association, runs several charities." "I just want to help however I can," Clint said. "This is horrifying. To think something like this was happening on my property." Mark made a decision. "The forensics team can finish processing the scene. Mr. Haraway, I'll come with you to get those records. The sooner we have that information, the sooner we can find who's responsible. Of course, I live in Denton Hills, not far from here. You can follow me, or—" "I'll ride with you," Mark said. He wanted to keep the man in sight and get a better read on him. As they walked to Mark's car, Clint continued talking. "Agent Callahan, I want you to know I'll cooperate fully. If someone used my property for whatever this is, I want them caught as much as you do." Mark nodded, starting the engine. "Just lead the way, Mr. Haraway." As they pulled away from the storage facility, Mark caught a glimpse of the forensics van arriving in his rearview mirror. Whatever had happened in that foil-lined room, whatever had happened to Nathan, the answers might lie with the nervous real estate developer sitting beside him. Or maybe Clint Haraway was exactly what he appeared to be, an innocent property owner caught up in something terrible. Time would tell. The drive to Denton Hills took them through increasingly manicured streets, the modest homes near the storage facility giving way to sprawling lawns and gated driveways. After several moments driving, they reached Clint's suburban estate, a 2-story colonial with white columns and perfectly trimmed hedges that screamed old Texas money. Mark parked his Crown Victoria on the circular driveway, noting the expensive landscaping and the 3-car garage. Everything about the property suggested wealth and respectability. He followed Clint up the brick walkway to an imposing front door with leaded glass panels. "Please come in," Clint said, producing a key ring. "My office is just through here." The interior matched the exterior's promise: polished hardwood floors, crown molding, and tasteful artwork lining the walls. Clint led him through a spacious foyer and down a hallway to a ground-floor office. The room was all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a massive mahogany desk. "The rental record should be in here somewhere," Clint said, moving to a tall filing cabinet behind the desk. "I keep everything organized by property and year." While Clint searched through the files, Mark's trained eye swept the room, taking in details: legal books, real estate journals, various civic awards on the walls. But what caught his attention were the photographs, dozens of them, arranged on the desk and shelves. Each photo showed Clint smiling with groups of women and children. The settings varied, some outdoors, some in what looked like institutional hallways, but the pattern was consistent. Different faces in every picture, mostly Hispanic or Asian features, and many of the subjects looked uncomfortable in front of the camera. Mark picked up one of the framed photos from the desk. "Quite a collection here?" Clint looked up from the filing cabinet, his face brightening. "Oh, those. They're from the orphanage I sponsor down near the border. House of Renewed Light. We try to give these kids a better life, you know. Fresh start in America." He returned to his search, adding, "Some aren't used to smiling for pictures. Where they come from, cameras usually mean government documentation, deportation, that sort of thing." Mark examined the photo more closely. A small plaque on the building in the background confirmed the name: House of Renewed Light. It looked legitimate enough. Clean facilities, the children appeared well fed, and Clint's presence suggested regular involvement rather than just check writing. "That's admirable," Mark said, setting the photo back carefully. "Not many people would take such a hands-on approach to charity work." "Well, I've been blessed in business," Clint replied, pulling out a thick ledger. "I believe in giving back. These children, they've been through so much. If I can help even a few of them find proper homes, education, maybe even citizenship eventually, then it's worth it." He handed Mark the ledger, a leather-bound book with Backwoods Storage Depot, rental agreements, embossed on the cover. "This should have everything you need. Complete rental history for all units, including Unit 47. I keep detailed records, names, addresses, payment methods, dates. The IRS appreciates thoroughness, and so do I." Mark accepted the ledger, feeling its weight. "Thank you. This will be very helpful." "I just can't believe something like this happened at one of my properties," Clint said, shaking his head as he walked Mark back toward the front door. "That storage facility. It's not in the best part of town, I know, but I try to maintain safe, clean spaces for people who need them. To think someone turned it into whatever that was." They reached the front entrance, and Clint opened the door for Mark. "Please, Agent Callahan, reach out to me anytime if you need anything else. My home number, my office. I'll make sure you have all my contact information. I want to cooperate fully with the police and FBI in this investigation." "I appreciate that, Mr. Haraway," Mark said, tucking the ledger under his arm. "It's the least I can do," Clint replied, his expression grave. "If someone used my property to commit crimes, especially crimes involving a federal agent, I want them brought to justice. This kind of thing, it's not what Denton is about. We're a good community here." Mark nodded and made his way back to his car. He set the ledger carefully on the passenger seat, then reversed out of the circular driveway. As he headed back toward the police station, he couldn't shake the image of all those photographs. Charitable work with orphaned children was admirable, certainly. But something about the sheer number of photos, the different faces in each one, nagged at him. Still, Clint Haraway had been nothing but cooperative. The rental ledger would provide leads, and maybe they'd finally get some answers about what happened to Nathan. Mark pressed down on the accelerator, eager to dive into the records and see what Jonah Page, or whatever his real name was, might have left behind in the paper trail. Mark pulled into the Denton Police Department parking lot, the rental ledger still sitting on his passenger seat. The one-story brick building was buzzing with activity, more than usual for a Tuesday afternoon. Word of the FBI badge discovery had clearly energized the entire department. Inside, he found Lieutenant Martinez conferring with a plainclothes detective near the evidence processing room. Through the glass window, Mark could see technicians photographing the torture chair from multiple angles, its metal frame and leather restraints now under bright examination lights. "Agent Callahan," Martinez greeted him. "This is Detective Ray Sullivan. He's been leading the interrogation." Sullivan, a stocky man in his 40s with prematurely gray hair, shook Mark's hand. "Hell of a thing, finding your partner's badge like that. We've processed the scene thoroughly. That chair's headed to our lab for blood analysis and fingerprinting." "I want to speak with Jerome Miles," Mark said, "the homeless man who found everything." Sullivan scratched his jaw. "We just finished with him about 20 minutes ago. He's in holding cell 3, but I've got the full recording and transcript right here if you want to review it first." He held up a manila folder and a cassette tape. "I'll take both," Mark said. Sullivan led him to a small office overlooking the parking lot. "Use my desk. I'll be with forensics if you need anything." Mark settled into the worn office chair and inserted the cassette into the player on Sullivan's desk. He opened the transcript simultaneously, following along as Jerome's nervous voice filled the room. The interview started with standard questions: name, age, how long he'd been on the streets. Jerome Miles, 53, homeless for 2 years after losing his job at the Peterbilt factory. His voice was raspy, probably from years of smoking, but his answers were coherent and detailed. "I usually stay around that area," Jerome's recorded voice said. "Move to different spots every week so the cops don't hassle me. Backwoods storage, the old scrapyard, sometimes the drainage tunnels when it's cold." "Have you broken into storage units before?" the interviewer asked. "Yeah, I ain't gonna lie. Sometimes people leave good stuff. Sold a box of tools once, got enough for a week's food, but I never seen nothing like what was in that unit. Never." Mark followed along in the transcript, noting Jerome's consistency. Then came a question about security. "Were you aware of any surveillance cameras at the facility?" "Cameras? Nah, that place is usually dead. That's why I—" "Wait, no. Come to think of it, I did see something new last time I was scouting. Little box on the corner of the main building. Wasn't there before?" Mark made a note. Then his attention sharpened as he heard the next exchange. "Why did you choose Unit 47 specifically?" "Usually I avoid backwoods, to be honest. That place gives me the creeps." "Why's that?" "'Cause of the night activities. Seen it maybe 4, 5 times over the months. Vans pulling up at 2, 3 in the morning. Groups getting out. Women and kids mostly. They'd go into some units, stay for a bit, then leave. None of my business. But it made me nervous about hitting that place." Mark paused the tape and reread that section. Groups of women and children at night. His mind went back to all those photographs in Clint's office. He started the tape again. "Can you describe these groups?" "Dark, couldn't see much, but definitely women and kids. Young ones? Teenagers maybe. Different groups each time. They looked, I don't know, scared? Kept close together. Men with them looked like guards or something." The interview continued for another 10 minutes, but Mark had heard enough. He found Detective Sullivan back at the evidence room. "That mention of night activities," Mark said. "Women and children. I saw photographs at Clint Haraway's house, dozens of pictures with women and children from an orphanage he sponsors." Sullivan's expression was skeptical. "Haraway's a pillar of the community, sits on the hospital board, funds the youth soccer league. It's not unusual for charitable types to have photos like that." "I know," Mark admitted. "That's what I thought too, but combined with Jerome's observations—" He thought for a moment. "What about those surveillance cameras Jerome mentioned?" Sullivan reached into a folder and produced a photograph. Tech guys say this model came out in late 1990, professional grade, records to VHS. We pulled some tapes from the unit, but the storage is limited. If there are archives, Haraway would have them. I need to talk to him about the surveillance permits and any archive footage, Mark decided. He picked up Sullivan's desk phone and dialed the number Clint had provided. After 6 rings, it went to an answering machine. He tried Clint's office number with the same result. "He just left there 40 minutes ago," Mark said, hanging up. "I'm going to head back, see if he's home. We need those surveillance records." "Want backup?" Sullivan asked. "No, I'm just gathering information, but I need you to dig into that torture chair. Serial numbers, manufacturer, purchase records, anything that might tell us where it came from?" "Already on it," Sullivan confirmed. "That's medical-grade equipment. Someone had to special order it." Mark headed for the door, then paused. "And, Detective?" "Have someone discreetly look into the House of Renewed Light orphanage. Just basic stuff. Registration, licenses, that sort of thing." Sullivan nodded slowly. "You think Haraway's involved?" "I think we need to be thorough," Mark replied carefully. 4 years ago, my partner vanished investigating trafficking. Now his badge turns up in a torture chamber owned by a man who regularly transports women and children. Could be coincidence, but I need to be sure. Mark drove back toward Clint's house, trying the phone number again as he navigated the suburban streets. Still no answer. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Denton Hills, and Mark wondered if Clint had simply stepped out for an errand. But as he turned onto Clint Street, he instinctively slowed down. A black Chevrolet Suburban was parked outside the property, its engine running. A man in a dark suit and sunglasses stood beside it, his posture suggesting he was standing guard rather than waiting casually. Something in Mark's gut tightened, a familiar feeling from years of field work. He pulled over about 100 yards away, parking behind a landscaping truck that gave him cover while maintaining a clear view of Clint's driveway. Through his windshield, he watched as Clint emerged from his house accompanied by another man in dark glasses. Even from this distance, Mark could see the tension in their body language. Clint's usual smooth demeanor was replaced by sharp, agitated gestures. The other man stood rigid, his hands clasped in front of him like a soldier at ease. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. Clint reached into his jacket and produced a thick manila envelope, sealed with what looked like packing tape. He handed it to the man, then gestured toward the wooded area behind his property, pointing emphatically as he spoke. The man in sunglasses nodded once, took the envelope, and walked briskly back to the SUV. Clint stood in his driveway, watching as the vehicle pulled away. Only when it had turned the corner did he head back inside his house. Mark sat frozen for a moment, weighing his options. The exchange could be anything: a business transaction, legal documents, private security matters. Wealthy men like Clint often dealt with bodyguards and private investigators. But the timing, so soon after the storage unit discovery, nagged at him, and Clint had pointed toward the woods, suggesting a destination rather than just giving directions. The SUV was getting farther away. Mark made his decision and pulled out, maintaining a safe following distance. He knew this area well enough. It was residential for several miles in every direction, with no office buildings or commercial centers where a business meeting might take place. If Clint had been pointing to a property, it had to be something private, secluded. As he drove, Mark reached for his radio and called the station. "This is Agent Callahan. I need someone to pull all real estate holdings for Clint Haraway and his companies. Look for any remote properties, especially anything near the Denton Hills area." "Copy that," the dispatcher responded. "Detective Sullivan wants to know if you need backup." "Not yet. I'm just following a lead, but have a unit on standby." The black SUV led him out of the suburban sprawl and onto Farm Road 2450, heading west toward more rural territory. After about 15 minutes, it turned onto a gravel access road, marked only by a weathered wooden sign. Mark slowed, letting the SUV get ahead before following. Through the trees, he glimpsed a large building, institutional-looking, with white stucco walls and a red tile roof. As he got closer, he could make out the lettering on a monument sign. House of Renewed Light, a haven for children. It was the same orphanage from Clint's photographs. Mark parked at a distance and watched as the men exited the SUV. They walked with purpose toward the main entrance, the one carrying the envelope leading the way. A middle-aged woman in a gray dress emerged to greet them. From her bearing and the way she gestured, she appeared to be in charge. She accepted the envelope with both hands and gave a small deferential bow. The men stayed only a few moments before returning to their vehicle and departing. Mark felt foolish. Of course, Clint would send donations to the orphanage he supported. The envelope was probably a check or cash donation, the men likely private security he employed for such transfers. Still, having come this far, he decided to take a look at the facility himself. The building was larger than it appeared in the photographs, a sprawling single-story structure that looked like it might have once been a school or medical facility. Mark parked in the visitor area and walked to the main entrance, his FBI credentials ready. The same woman who had greeted the men answered his knock. Up close, he could see she was perhaps 50, with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun and sharp, intelligent eyes. "May I help you?" she asked, her accent suggesting Eastern European origins. Mark showed his badge. "Special Agent Mark Callahan, FBI. Please don't be alarmed. I'm not here about the orphanage specifically. We found some evidence related to a case at a property owned by Mr. Clint Haraway, and I'm just following up on all his property connections." The woman's expression softened slightly. "Oh, Mr. Haraway, such a generous man. I am Mrs. Volkov, the director here. Please, come in." She led him through a reception area that smelled of industrial disinfectant and into a hallway lined with children's artwork. "Mr. Haraway founded this orphanage 5 years ago," she explained as they walked. "We care for children who have lost their parents, many from across the border. We help them find new families, new opportunities." The tour was brief but thorough. Mark saw dormitory rooms with neat rows of beds, a cafeteria where a handful of children were having an afternoon snack, a small classroom with outdated textbooks. Everything appeared clean and orderly, if somewhat austere. The building seemed smaller on the inside than its exterior suggested, as if not all of it was being utilized. "You're welcome to look around more," Mrs. Volkov said, as they returned to the reception area. "I have a meeting with some donors now. They just arrived. Someone will bring you coffee if you'd like to wait." Mark watched as a group of well-dressed men entered and followed Mrs. Volkov toward what appeared to be an administrative wing. He settled into one of the worn chairs in the waiting area, studying the faded motivational posters on the walls. A few minutes later, a teenage girl appeared carrying a tray with a coffee cup. She was Asian, probably Southeast Asian, with long black hair and nervous eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the cup on the table. "Are you police?" she asked quietly, her English heavily accented. "FBI," Mark said gently, showing his badge. "Thank you for the coffee." The girl glanced quickly over her shoulder, then back at him. "Here is... is all right here. I am new." Something in her tone made Mark lean forward. "How long have you been here?" 2 weeks only." She twisted her hands together. "I am 18 years. My name is Dara Pov from Cambodia." Mark found it odd that an orphanage would take in an 18-year-old well past the typical adoption age. "Are you all right, Dara? You seem frightened." She looked behind her again, ensuring they were alone. Then, in a rush of words, "They took my friend. Last week people came and took her, and other children. Please, you help her?" Mark's pulse quickened. "Took her where?" "I know where," Dara whispered urgently. "They took me too, but they not choose me. Send me back. They say I am due this week." "Due for what?" "I don't know. Other children say is not good when they say do. Please, I am scared. You help?" Before Mark could respond, a male staff member appeared in the doorway. "Dara, come. You have chores?" The girl's face went pale. Mark stood up. "Actually, I was just talking to Dara about taking her out for ice cream. She mentioned she's never been to an American ice cream parlor." The staff member frowned. "She had ice cream last week?" "I'm Agent Callahan, FBI," Mark said, producing his badge again. "I've taken a bit of a personal interest in Dara here. Bright girl. I think she has a future." At that moment, Mrs. Volkov emerged from her meeting, the group of donors filing out behind her. They eyed Mark with suspicious interest as they passed. "What's happening here?" Mrs. Volkov asked, noticing the tension. Mark explained his ice cream invitation, keeping his tone light and casual. Mrs. Volkov's lips pursed. "This is highly irregular. We have procedures." "Of course," Mark said smoothly. "I understand completely, but surely a small exception could be made? I am a federal agent, after all, a trusted figure in the community, as Mr. Haraway would confirm." Mrs. Volkov considered this. "Very well, but Jacob must accompany you. We cannot allow children to leave unescorted." Mark nodded, though internally he was racing through options. In the parking lot, while Jacob was talking with Mrs. Volkov, Mark whispered quickly to Dara, "Show me where your friend is." "Don't worry about Jacob." The girl nodded, understanding flashing in her eyes. Mark used his radio in the car to call the station. "This is Callahan. I need units on standby. Possible situation developing. Monitor the House of Renewed Light Orphanage and Clint Haraway's residence." He gave them the addresses, speaking in quick, professional tones. "And I need a tail on my vehicle, discreetly. I may be heading into something." When everything was ready, he helped the girl into his car. Dara slid into the front passenger seat, while Jakob, the staff member, climbed into the back, immediately voicing his displeasure. "She should sit in back," Jakob protested, his accent thick. "Is not proper." "It's fine," Mark said firmly, starting the engine. "She can sit anywhere she wants." They left the orphanage grounds. Dara glanced at him gratefully, then pointed to the access road. "That way? Go west?" Mark pulled onto the road, noting in his rearview mirror that the patrol car was maintaining a discreet distance behind them. Jakob sat rigid in the back seat, arms crossed, clearly unhappy with the arrangement. For the first 15 minutes, they drove in relative silence through rural Texas landscape. Farm roads gave way to even smaller county roads, the terrain becoming increasingly desolate. Dara provided quiet directions at each intersection, her voice barely above a whisper. "Left here, now straight for long time. Yes, keep going." It was Jakob who first voiced what Mark already knew. "This is not way to town. Where are you taking us?" "Just a little detour," Mark said calmly. "No?" Jakob leaned forward. "Turn around now. This is kidnapping. I call police." Mark gestured with his thumb toward the rear window. "The police are already here. That patrol car has been with us since we left." Jacob twisted around, saw the marked unit, and his face went pale. "What is this? Mr. Haraway will hear about this. There will be consequences." He fumbled for his phone, punching in numbers with shaking fingers. In one smooth motion, Mark reached back with his free hand and snatched the phone away, keeping his other hand steady on the wheel. "No calls right now, Jacob?" "You can't do this. Is illegal." Mark pulled the car to the shoulder and turned to face Jakob fully. "Listen to me very carefully. This young woman has told me that children are being taken from your orphanage, trafficked. Her friend was taken last week, and she knows where." "Is lies," Jakob sputtered. "Crazy girl tells stories." "Maybe," Mark said. "Or maybe you know exactly what's been happening. Here's your choice, Jakob. You can help us. Tell us what you know, cooperate fully, and the police and I will make sure the court knows you assisted in rescuing these children. Or you can keep protecting whoever's behind this and go down with them. What's it going to be? Jakob's face cycled through several emotions: anger, fear, calculation. Finally, his shoulders slumped. I just work there. I do what they tell me. And what do they tell you? Sometimes we prepare children for adoption. Special adoptions. They tell us not to ask questions. Where do they take them? Jakob was silent for a long moment, then pointed ahead. Same place she's taking you. The old Benedetti vineyard is abandoned for 10 years, but people use it for the special adoptions. Mark started driving again. You're making the right choice, Jacob. They drove for another 40 minutes, deeper into Ponder County. The landscape became increasingly desolate: scrub brush, abandoned farmhouses, rusted equipment left to decay in fallow fields. Finally, Dara pointed to a worn dirt road nearly hidden by overgrown mesquite. There, that's the place. Mark turned onto the road, slowing as the car bounced over ruts and potholes. Through the brush he could see the remains of what had once been a prosperous vineyard, row after row of dead, twisted grapevines stretching up a gentle slope. At the top sat a collection of buildings: a main house with broken windows and peeling paint, several outbuildings, and what looked like a large processing facility. And parked near the main house, the black SUV from Clint's place. Mark radioed the patrol car. "We've got the same vehicle from the Haraway residence, proceeding with caution." He parked at a safe distance and stepped out, hand resting on his service weapon. 2 uniformed officers from the patrol car joined him. "Officer Martinez, stay with the girl," Mark instructed. "Officer Thompson, you're with me. Jakob, you're coming too. Show us where they conduct this special adoption business." Jakob led them past the main house, which was clearly abandoned, doors hanging off hinges, roof partially collapsed. But as they moved toward the old barrel storage building, Mark noticed signs of recent activity. Fresh tire tracks, cigarette butts, a new padlock on what should have been a defunct facility. They were approaching the cellar entrance when Mark heard it: a weak, persistent coughing from somewhere below ground, followed by what sounded like someone struggling against restraints. "Radio for backup," Mark told Thompson quietly. "And EMT, now." Thompson made the call while Mark studied the cellar doors. They looked reinforced, newer than the surrounding structure. Jacob was sweating despite the cool afternoon air. "They're down there?" Mark asked. Jacob nodded miserably. "The special room, for preparation." Thompson finished his radio call and examined the wall near the cellar entrance. "Sir, look at this." He pushed against what appeared to be a solid wall, but it gave slightly. "False panel. Recent construction." Mark drew his weapon. "Federal agent," he called out. "Anyone down there needs to come up with their hands visible." No response except for more coughing and a muffled cry. "We're going in," Mark decided. He looked at Jacob. "Last chance. You with us or against us?" "With you," Jacob whispered. "God forgive me. With you." The 3 men descended the wooden steps into darkness. Mark's flashlight swept across a narrow corridor that opened into a larger underground space. The smell hit them first: human waste, fear, sweat, and something medical, antiseptic. Then Mark's light found him. Nathan Raines, barely recognizable after 4 years, was chained to a metal rack against the far wall. His hair was long and matted, his body skeletal, dressed in filthy rags. Burn marks and scars covered his exposed skin. 1 ear was missing, several fingers gone. Standing over him was one of the men from the orphanage, preparing a syringe filled with clear liquid. "FBI! Drop the syringe and step away!" Mark shouted, his weapon trained on the man. The trafficker spun around, shock replacing concentration on his face. Nathan's eyes, hollow but still alert, widened in recognition. "Mark?" The voice was barely a whisper, ruined by years of screaming. The trafficker immediately dropped the syringe, letting it clatter on the concrete floor. He raised his hands as Thompson moved in with handcuffs, kicking the syringe safely away. "Nathan," Mark breathed, holstering his weapon to approach his partner. "Jesus Christ, we thought you were dead." Before Nathan could respond, footsteps echoed from the corridor. 3 more men appeared, freezing when they saw the officers. "Hands up!" "Now!" Thompson commanded. 2 of them bolted immediately. Thompson managed to grab one while Mark pursued the others up the stairs and into the fading daylight. He fired a warning shot into the air. "Stop, or the next one won't be a warning." One man spun around, pulling a pistol from his waistband. The bullet went wide, sparking off a metal barrel. He tried to aim again, but Mark's training kicked in. 2 shots, center mass. The man crumpled. The 3rd man threw himself to the ground, hands behind his head. "Don't shoot! I surrender!" Mark zip-tied him as backup units roared onto the property, officers spreading out to secure the perimeter. EMTs rushed toward the cellar where Nathan waited. "There are more victims," Mark told the arriving lieutenant. "A girl came here looking for her friend. If Nathan's here, there have to be others." The search took an hour. They checked every building, every possible hiding place. Finally, in the abandoned wine processing facility, an officer noticed scratch marks around a storage room door, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. Inside, they found them. 15 women and children huddled in a space meant for equipment, no windows, 1 bucket for waste. The smell was overwhelming. Some cried when they saw the uniforms. Others seemed too broken to react. A woman who appeared to be the oldest grabbed Mark's arm. "The tank," she said in broken English. "They put the ones who sick or die in the tank. Please, some were alive when they went in. Please check." Mark and Thompson found the access ladder to the fermentation tanks. Mark climbed up, steeling himself for what he might find. The smell hit him before he even looked inside. He forced himself to shine his light down into the tank. Bodies, at least 6, in various stages of decomposition, floating in the remnants of old wine and rainwater. Mark keyed his radio with shaking hands. "We need the coroner and a full forensics team. Multiple victims in the fermentation tank." Sometime later, the abandoned vineyard had transformed into a coordinated crime scene. Rescue vehicles filled the dirt road, their emergency lights painting the dead grapevines in alternating red and blue. FBI agents and local police officers moved with practiced efficiency, securing evidence and processing the multiple crime scenes. Mark stood near the processing facility, watching as EMTs carefully led the rescued women and children to waiting ambulances. His radio crackled to life. "Unit 12 to all units. Suspect Clint Haraway has been apprehended at his residence. He's being transported to Denton PD for booking." A small measure of relief washed over Mark. At least they'd gotten the man at the top. He watched as officers escorted the traffickers to patrol cars, their hands cuffed behind their backs. The one Mark had shot was being loaded into the coroner's van, a necessary outcome that still left him feeling hollow. Across the yard, he spotted Dara kneeling beside a stretcher where another young Asian woman lay, the friend she'd been searching for. Even from this distance, Mark could see them crying, clutching each other's hands. He made his way over to them. "Thank you," Dara said, looking up at him with tears streaming down her face. "You saved her. You saved us all." Her friend, who couldn't have been more than 16, whispered something in what Mark assumed was Khmer. Dara translated, "She says you're a guardian angel." "I'm just glad we found you in time," Mark said gently. "Listen, both Mr. Haraway and the orphanage have been secured. You're safe now. Child Protective Services will help you figure out what comes next. Make sure you're taken care of." Dara nodded, then surprised him by standing and hugging him briefly before returning to her friend's side. Mark left them to the EMTs and scanned the organized chaos until he found what he was looking for. Near one of the ambulances, Nathan Raines sat on a gurney while paramedics checked his vitals. Even cleaned up slightly and wrapped in a thermal blanket, he looked terrible. His face was gaunt, cheekbones sharp beneath paper-thin skin. His remaining hair had gone completely gray. But it was his expression that struck Mark most, not relief or joy at being rescued, but something closer to despair. Mark approached slowly, not wanting to startle him. "Nathan?" His former partner looked up, attempted a smile that didn't reach his hollow eyes. "Hey, Mark, some rescue, huh? Just like old times." The attempt at humor fell flat, his voice hoarse and broken. "How are you holding up?" Nathan shrugged, then winced at the movement. "Physically? I'll live. They kept me alive for a reason." He paused, his jaw working. "Mark, I need to tell you something. These people, they're part of the Crossroads Network." Mark's eyes widened. The Crossroads Network was a human trafficking organization the FBI had been investigating for years, a sophisticated operation that moved victims across the Mexican border through a series of safe houses and corrupt officials. Nathan had been heading the investigation when he disappeared. "They grabbed me in '87, Nathan continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was following a lead on some shell companies they were using. Thought I was meeting an informant, but it was a setup. They wanted everything I knew about the investigation." "Nathan, you don't have to." "No, I need to say this." Nathan's remaining fingers clutched the blanket. "They tortured me, Mark, for weeks at first, then periodically for years. The chair you found, that was just one of their tools. They broke me. I gave them everything. Safe house locations, undercover identities, surveillance schedules. Everything." His voice cracked. "Because of what I told them, they were able to restructure their entire operation, avoid our raids, expand into new territories. God knows how many women and children were trafficked because I couldn't hold out." "Nathan, stop." Mark put a hand on his partner's shoulder, feeling bones through the blanket. "You held out for 4 years. Look at me. You survived what no one should have to endure. This isn't on you. But all those victims were saved today because a brave young woman led us here." Mark pointed toward where Dara was being loaded into an ambulance. "That girl, Dara Pav, she's the one who told me where to find this place. And you know what started all this? A homeless man named Jerome Miles broke into that storage unit and found your badge. He could have pawned it, but instead he went to the police. People helped each other, Nathan. That's what broke this case, not anything you did or didn't do under torture." Nathan looked up sharply. "Someone found the torture room?" "This morning, they'd moved your belongings there, probably figured no one would ever look in some random storage unit." For the first time, Nathan's composure completely broke. Tears rolled down his scarred cheeks as his shoulders shook with silent sobs. Mark noticed the missing fingers on his right hand, the bandage where his left ear should have been. Burn scars created a horrific pattern across his neck and arms. "They were going to kill me today," Nathan said when he could speak again. "That injection, it was potassium chloride. They said I'd outlived my usefulness, that the police were sniffing around too much after the storage unit was discovered. If you'd been an hour later—" "But we weren't," Mark said firmly. "You're alive, Nathan. That's what matters now." One of the paramedics approached. "We need to transport him now. He needs immediate hospital care, malnutrition, infected wounds, possible organ damage from prolonged captivity." Mark squeezed Nathan's shoulder gently. "I'll come check on you at the hospital. We'll talk more when you're feeling stronger." Nathan nodded weakly as the paramedics prepared him for transport. "Mark, thank you for not giving up." "Partners don't give up on each other," Mark replied. He watched as they loaded Nathan into the ambulance, followed by the rescued victims in other emergency vehicles. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the abandoned vineyard. Crime scene tape fluttered in the evening breeze, marking the places where unimaginable horrors had occurred. With the immediate rescue operations complete, Mark coordinated briefly with the forensic team leader and ranking police officer, ensuring the scene would be properly processed through the night. Then he climbed into his Crown Victoria and headed for the Denton police station, where Clint Haraway and his accomplices waited in custody. The dashboard clock read 6:47 p.m. as he drove back toward town, the rural landscape giving way once again to civilization. In his rearview mirror, the emergency lights at the vineyard grew smaller until they were just aglow on the horizon. The Denton police station was buzzing with activity when Mark arrived. The magnitude of the operation meant every available interrogation room was occupied, with federal agents and local detectives working in tandem to process the suspects. Mark made his way down the corridor, glancing through the observation windows. In the first room, Mrs. Volkov sat rigid in her chair, her earlier composure completely shattered, as detectives pressed her about the orphanage's role in the trafficking operation. Next door, two of the men from the vineyard were being questioned separately, their tough facades crumbling under the weight of evidence. But it was the room at the end of the corridor that drew Mark's attention. He entered the observation area, joining several officers already watching through the one-way glass. Inside, Clint Haraway sat across from Detective Sullivan and an FBI interrogator Mark recognized as Agent Patricia Chen. Clint looked nothing like the polished philanthropist from this morning. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his silver hair disheveled. But it was his eyes that had changed most, the confident warmth replaced by cold calculation as he seemed to weigh his options. "Tell us about Nathan Raines," Agent Chen was saying. "We know you held him. We found him. So let's skip the denials and get to the truth." Clint was silent for a long moment, then leaned back in his chair. When he spoke, his voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing a business transaction. Agent Raines was investigating our cross-border operations in 1987, focusing on unregistered rural properties we used as waypoints. He was getting close. Too close. So we arranged a meeting through one of his informants, told him we had information about a major shipment. Where was this meeting? An abandoned hardware store on the outskirts of Denton, one of my properties, naturally. We had a man posing as a homeless vagrant approach him in the parking lot asking for help. When Raines let his guard down, the man used a tranquilizer dart. Quick, efficient. We loaded him into a carpet cleaning van and took him to one of my undeclared rental properties. Sullivan leaned forward. And then? Then we extracted information. The basement room was specially prepared, soundproofed, no windows. We used various methods: stress positions, sleep deprivation, temperature extremes. The torture chair was particularly effective for longer sessions. A medical contact of mine, a nurse with certain dependencies, kept him alive and functional. Mark felt his fists clench as Clint continued his clinical recitation. Raines was strong at first, but everyone breaks eventually. Within 6 months, he'd given us the entire FBI playbook on the Crossroads network: safe house locations, undercover identities, surveillance schedules, planned raids. We restructured our entire operation based on his intelligence. "And you kept him for 4 years?" Chen asked. "He was a continuing asset. The FBI's tactics evolved, and so did our need for information. We moved him between various sites, basement rooms, shipping containers, finally the vineyard. The chair and his belongings went into storage when we upgraded our methods. I never imagined anyone would find that unit." "Why keep him alive so long?" Clint shrugged. "Insurance, information. And frankly, some of my associates enjoyed having a federal agent at their mercy. It sent a message to anyone thinking of betraying us." Through the glass, Mark watched Clint's casual recounting of horrors, feeling rage build in his chest. He turned to the senior officer beside him. "I want this man charged with everything possible," Mark said quietly. "Kidnapping, torture, human trafficking, conspiracy, murder for the bodies in that tank. His cooperation and community standing mean nothing. No plea deals. He faces the full weight of what he's done. The officer nodded. After what we found today, he won't see daylight again. Mark left the observation room, needing air, needing to be somewhere that wasn't filled with the casual evil of Clint Haraway's confessions. He drove to Denton Presbyterian Hospital, where the victims had been taken. The pediatric ward was quiet, a stark contrast to the police station. Mark found Dara and her friend, whose name he'd learned was Savannah, in a shared room. A CPS caseworker, a kindly woman named Janet Morrison, was with them. Agent Callahan, Janet greeted him. I was just discussing options with the girls: foster placement, eventual sponsorship for citizenship, educational opportunities. How are they doing? Remarkably well, considering. They're survivors. Mark spent a few minutes talking with them about their futures, about the support systems in place. Then, on impulse, he made a suggestion. Would you like to meet someone? The man we found at the vineyard. He was kept prisoner because he was trying to stop the people who hurt you. I think it might help both him and you to meet. After getting medical clearance, Mark accompanied the girls to Nathan's room 2 floors up. His former partner was awake, looking marginally better with IV fluids and pain medication, though the extent of his injuries was still shocking in the harsh hospital lighting. Nathan, Mark said softly, there are some people who'd like to meet you. Dara stepped forward first, her voice small but steady. You tried to stop them. They hurt you because you tried to protect people like us. Nathan's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't stop them sooner. The things I told them? No, Savannah spoke for the first time, her English halting but clear. You fight them. They break you, but you fight. We understand. We forgive. The room fell silent except for the quiet beep of medical monitors. Then Dara reached out and gently took Nathan's damaged hand in both of hers. Now we all free. That's what matters. Mark stood back, watching this unexpected moment of grace. In all the darkness they'd uncovered today, here was something pure. Victims recognizing each other's pain, offering forgiveness where none was required, finding strength in shared survival. It was, he realized, what would ultimately defeat operations like Crossroads. Not just law enforcement or justice systems, but the resilience of the human spirit, the capacity for people to help each other heal. Jerome Miles could have ignored what he found. Dara could have stayed silent in fear. Nathan could have given up hope. But they didn't. Evil might be organized and powerful, but goodness, when it came together, was stronger still.